Thank you.
Where you want to do it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all can come.
All right, Attorney D, we ready to roll?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so we are here
We're gonna
today.
do 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll get started.
Mhm.
Okay. One, two,
Two,
three.
three. All right, roll them.
Roll.
All right.
Hi, we're here today with Attorney John Dew. We're in Tallahassee, Florida at the home of Sam and Thelma Dixie. My name is Paul Ortiz. It's August 4th. Thank you, Attorney Dew, for agreeing to do this interview. It's great to be with you again.
That's right. I'm glad to be here because freedom is not free, and we need to continue to work on the history of the freedom movement for the next generation that includes my grandchildren.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Well, Attorney Dew, I understand. I'm looking right now at a stack of books that you set up for us that you want to talk about. Each of these books has an important theme in terms of connecting the past and the present with struggles and this tradition of the freedom struggle. Can you talk about this book on the top is titled Freedom in the Family, a mother and daughter memoir of the fight for civil rights by Tananarive Dew and Patricia Stevens Dew. Why is this a book that's important for us to read today?
This book is important for people to read today, particularly my grandchildren, because this book is based upon the life experience of myself, John Dew, and Patricia Dew, when my grand aunt, the sister of my father, told me when I was at the age of 5 years old. She said, Johnny, life is not safe. Your life will be in danger, and you will have to know how to live to survive. And therefore, that's important because she told me that at the age of 5 years old. And because of the freedom movement, when I was in Indiana at the age of 24, 25, 30, in Indiana, and read about the freedom movement by Patricia Stevens Dew, who chose to be arrested to fight desegregation in Tallahassee, I knew what my grandmother told me and said, I'm going to leave Indiana and come to Florida. And you know the rest of the story. Freedom in the family.
Freedom in the Family. One more question, Attorney Dew, before we move on to the next book. You mentioned Patricia was arrested for her movement activity.
Yes.
She went to jail, and in contrast to a lot of other freedom movement members, she refused to be bailed out.
Yes.
She stayed. Can you tell us why that was important?
Patricia felt, so why should I pay for something that's wrong? Why should I pay to get out? They're the ones that are wrong. They say I violated their law. Their law is not my law. I didn't ask to be born. That's what she always told me. But since I am born, I'm going to make this a better place for myself and everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the rest of the story.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Now, the next book on your bookshelf here is a very famous book called The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. And this was a book that a lot of people in the United States started reading in the 1960s. Can you tell us why Frantz Fanon's work is so important for understanding this theme about freedom not being free?
This is a very critical book because people in America was beginning to think that the freedom movement was just about white racism and black racism. And this African psychiatrist by the name of Frantz Fanon, he had identified and diagnosed the real problem racism is a result of another mental health problem, because he was a psychiatrist. He understood that the Europeans and Europe, when that rat from that ship in the 14th century got off that ship and affected all those Europeans in the north, and they caught the Black Plague and the Black Death. 60% of the European population died from the Black Plague. This was before Africans were, discovered. These Europeans died from the Black Plague. And as they died, they were separated and segregated in colonies. And the skin turned black as they died. Now, the Europeans originally had black skin, but 10,000 years before, when the earth cooled down, they migrated to the north. They migrated to Europe, and because banana trees don't grow in Europe, they lost the color, lack of vitamin D deficiency. So by the time of the Black Plague, the Europeans were supposed to be white, but from the plague, their skin turned black. And you know the rest of the story. When they came to America, they had a holy mission to clean people from the plague. That's what this is about. The wretched
Wretched of the earth.
of the earth.
Okay.
To colonize people, because if they can't be saved, they're going to be killed.
Mm-hmm.
They came to America. The Native Americans were the first black people. They weren't black, of course, but there weren't any black people in America in the 15th, 16th century. So they were eliminated. We're sitting now in the beautiful town of Tallahassee. We have all these streets, all these places named after Native Americans. And we don't know one Native America in Tallahassee, because they were all killed in genocide by the Europeans when they came to America and conquered America to bring their evil people. It was a holy mission, a godly mission, to bring their evil people to America. America was not perceived as a good place at that time. So America was a prison colony originally for these bad people. Those that they could not save, you know what happened to them.
Yeah. Well, and Americans don't like to hear the story about being in a prison colony, but my wife and I were just in New Zealand, and right next door, Australia is the place that the British designated after the American Revolution. So that's very interesting.
Yes, as a prison colony. Back in those days, America was no place to go to.
No.
It was a prison colony to dump their evil people from Europe.
Well, one of the things, Attorney Dew, you mentioned earlier, you mentioned the term colonialism, and you also talked about genocide and the genocide of Native Americans. And as long as I've known you, when you've talked about African American history, you've always insisted that Native American history should be at the center of black history. Can you talk about why that's important?
Oh, it's critically important, because as African Americans, we need to talk to our grandparents and find out where we came from, who we are, and all that. And it's because that I had grandparents and I had a grand aunt who was the sister to my father. I learned, I was part Cherokee. If you're about 6 or 7 years old, what does that mean? You're Cherokee. So African Americans are mixed. We are of color, they call it, with other natives. And look at my head. Yeah, have you ever seen a big head like this before? The Delaware Indians had that funny shaped head. We a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Thomas and I met a lady who was a part Delaware Indian with that funny head like I have. So we all of color, or not just from Africa, but also Native American, the Cherokee, the Delaware, other Native American tribes.
Okay. So Attorney Dew, I'm going to skip down to the bottom and then work our way back up, because I
Okay.
see you have Martin Luther King Jr.'s Where Do We Go From Here? Now, most people have no idea what that book is about. Can you tell us what Where Do We Go From Here is about, and why Dr. King, why this is kind of his last testament?
This is a very important, and I advise all of your students to read this book, because they get misinformation that civil rights was just about black race, white race, and civil rights. But Patricia, who I met and married, her struggle was not to be equal to crackers, because they were sick. They need help. So her mission was not just on behalf of people who had black skin, but was a mission on behalf of all people, to save all people. And that's why it is so critical when we look at colonialism. Dr. Fentanyl understood what the politic was. The politic was because of that mental neural insanity that Europeans had, because their skin had turned black and all la da 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 da. They had to have a religion to clean America, clean, and that's what colonizing meant. We're going to come to America to clean America up and get rid of these dirty people. And that's what colonizing meant. And Dr. Fentanyl, an African psychiatrist, understood this, because this was not just an American problem, it was a universal problem in the world. Mm-hmm. Not just in Africa, not just also Australia, mm-hmm. Asia. This need to clean, need to heal people because they are colored. So this is so important as far as Dr. Franz Fanon, who's an African psychiatrist.
Okay.
That's why I think it's a book you must read.
A must-read book.
Yeah.
And then you had started talking earlier, Attorney Dew, about Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here?
Yes. Now, his wife, I think, wrote a note to his book, because, as you know, he wrote that book just before he was assassinated by, as far as I'm concerned, by the FBI. So she wrote a book. She wrote that note attached to that book as Where Do We Go From Here, which was a clarion call to the next generation. My husband brought us this far. It's up to you to move forward as to what we need to do. That's what that was her note to that book.
Excellent.
Yes.
So moving up the list, I see a couple books that I have not read. So Van Jones, Beyond the Messy Truth, and he's, you know, a TV anchor personality. CNN. And tell us about Van Jones and why we should read Beyond the Messy Truth.
Well, I am so fortunate to have children. Janita Doohan, an attorney, Tanada Reeve, she's a novelist, writer, and Lydia, because they were taught by their parents as to what they would have to do to live in this world, and now they're reaching out to my grandchildren. And why it's so important to recognize Brother Van Jones. He understands that when Diane Roof shot up the members of Ebenezer A.B. Church in Charleston, South Carolina, Diane Roof had a mental illness, but it was not a defense that was able to be used in court, because all of us have this mental illness from the Black Plague. So he went into that church on a mission to clean up people by killing them. And he left some to live, so that they could tell the story. His name is Diane Roof. And now, I understand the death penalty has now been accepted again. He's going to be killed, you know, in a death penalty. But the reality is, not just Diane Roof, not just Europeans, but also we colored people who are mixed up with these Europeans. We still have that genetic problem that the Europeans had in Europe in the 14th century that has become part of the genetic structure, and we now assimilate it into the present century in the 21st century. We all have this illness, and the way to deal with it is to cope with it, to cope with resilience. Yeah, resilience. Okay.
Okay. So is Van Jones, is he an individual that you would say personifies this resilience?
And yes, and then what is so interesting, I was talking to some of your people today about Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich is a Republican. He's very conservative, but he has written a book called Breakout. And although he's a conservative, on my way to Tallahassee from Atlanta, I stopped in Cherokee County because he was having a book signing of his book, Breakout. And when I went in that store, I was the only African American and half Native American there, and was given a seat. You know, he was so glad to see me.
Put you right in the front row.
In the front row, because I was always interested. Although he is a conservative, he has interesting ideas in relation to philosophy. One of those issues he calls future shock. Do I have it here?
No.
I don't have it here.
The Future Shock by Alvin Toffler?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, people. I don't have Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. But I think it's critical that you also add that to your book list to read, because at the University of Georgia, he taught future shock. And what that means in relation to what I am talking about is that we have a bipolar problem about race, about a disease, a mental problem, and that therefore we have to deal with it. We have to work and try to cope with it. So I have had interesting relationship with Newt Gingrich, and everyone should read that book, Future Shock, and other information by Alvin Toffler from the University of West Georgia.
Okay. If you don't mind, Attorney Dew, I'm also going to interject another book that you've talked with me frequently about. I don't see on your stack. The great thinker Eric Fromm.
Yes! Because you know I've been after you for 30 years in relation to Eric Fromm. I did not include it, but you're right. Now, let me explain what Eric Fromm is. Eric Fromm is also a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And he has written very interesting books that you must read. One is called Sane Society and the Art of Love, and there are a couple others. In other words, we have a psychological problem, and the only way to mediate, where is Reverend Steele? Is he over there?
He's right to your right.
He's right there. Let me hold your hand, Reverend Steele. Only way we can heal, only way we can redeem America is with love, with the art of love. It's not just a religious thing. It is a psychological thing. The art of love and sane society. But unfortunately, America tries to escape from freedom. That's the third book by Eric Fromm.
Exactly.
So these are, I'm sorry people, I was not able to bring those three books here today.
Well, and I apologize because actually I've been wanting to tell you this story. My wife and I were just in New Zealand for 2 weeks.
Okay.
I stopped in a small used bookstore in I think Napier, New Zealand. I found a copy of Eric Fromm's Art of Love.
That's right.
For 75 cents.
That's right.
Used. And the first paragraph is, love is hard work.
That's right.
He says you don't fall in love.
That's right.
You
got to work at it, baby.
Yeah. So it's a powerful, a rumination.
That's right.
So 2 books left. Now I'm not familiar with Colson Whitehead as much, the Nickel Boys.
Okay.
Why does Colson Whitehead belong in that list of weighty
Well, let me talk
books?
about the book called The Nickel Boys. That book really is about my wife's cousin at the Dozier School. My daughter, Tanana Reedu, is writing a book about Dozier School, and I just finished reading this book called The Nickel Boys, Colson Whitehead. Why the Dozier School is so important, they call it a boys' school for delinquent young men. But what Dozier was a death camp, just as bad as a death camp in Germany. And what was so interesting is that when Tanadari, my daughter, and I visited the Dozier School campus, because University of South Florida, to Senator, what's his name, see, I'm forgetting names now, was looking at the history of Dozier School.
Oh yeah, doing the archaeological, trying to find the mass graves. And,
yes. Yes. So we went to there. General Nelson. We went to Dozier School up there in Jackson County, and we saw it was not the African American that was raising hell. It was a European American who experienced, Dozier School. It was not just a race thing. They were killing white boys at that place. And they were raising all kind of hell. And that's when that was very important in my life, because I began to pick on you, because this thing is bigger than race. Something is wrong with our mentality. And Dozier School is an example of that.
Yeah.
And just this past week, who was shot up in El Paso, Texas?
Right.
It wasn't African Americans. And the world, what's in the other city? Just happened other day?
Dayton.
Dayton. These weren't African Americans shot up. And you know what happened in Broward County? What's the name of that school?
Parking.
Parker, yes.
Parkland, yeah.
So there is a mental illness that is beyond race that we have to deal with. And that's why I'm so happy to work with you, Dr. Ortiz, and your team, because I'm not the only one saying this. There was a professor at Florida A&M back in 1890, and I can't remember his name. Let's see if I got his name down. I hope I did. Gibbs!
Yeah.
Jonathan Gibbs.
Jonathan Gibbs, yeah.
Jonathan Gibbs.
Right.
Jonathan Gibbs understood this. Jonathan Gibbs, after the Civil War, was some of the African Americans that was sent south to the South to establish education. And his task was Tallahassee, Gainesville, and he established Florida A&M University, and he also established University of Florida. This was right after Reconstruction. He was not interested in just trying to help black people. He was a Presbyterian minister, General Nelson, who wanted to help all people. And that's what he was about, a Presbyterian of getting people to save all people. And
Yeah.
that is what I'm trying to work on right now.
I'm working on another famous Presbyterian minister right now, Reverend Henry Highland Garnett,
Yes.
who had an incredible sweep of how he conceived of freedom and was heavily involved in Latin American politics.
Yes.
But I wanted to go back just a few more questions. So the Colson Whitehead, Dozier Boys School, it's opened very early in the 20th century.
Yes.
Every single report that I've read about the school, and the first report was published no more than 4 or 5 years after that school opened, around 1904. And the very first report mentioned brutality, killings, disappearances of these young boys. And every report after that, every 4 to 5 years, they'd have these like grisly stories.
Yes.
And even during the Claude Kirk regime, he did a famous visit to Dozier, and he was there for about half a day, and he came out and he gave a news conference.
Yeah.
And one of the reporters said, what do you think about Dozier? And Governor Kirk said, if my son or if your son had been incarcerated in this school, you get a gun and sort it out. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, how could this school have existed for over a century?
Yes.
Every single report talks about these brutalities. How on earth? So is that what you mean by like a society that is mentally ill?
That's what I'm saying. It's not
Um,
racism. Racism is a product of this insanity. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's right. That's what it is. Because they were messing with people before Africans were brought to America, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the one book I'm looking, The New Black by Kenneth Mack and Guy
Oh,
Charles.
yes.
Now that's a book I looked at years ago.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that book
Yes.
and why it belongs with these other books?
This book is so important because too many African Americans want to maintain the politics as a black thing only, as a race. See, my argument is there's not a black race or white race that the United States Supreme Court said in the Plessy versus Ferguson case. That was a dumb decision. And therefore, the court program was, since we have separate races, the law is that blacks ought to be equal to white people. But see, ain't one race, the human race. So what is important about the new black, the Europeans that were in prison, said, hey, we're just being treated just like as if we're niggers. You know? We gotta change this stuff. So what these Europeans in prison did is to join the NAACP because they want to correct the corrupt criminal justice system. And this is not a popular politic yet among African Americans yet. But at least the NAACP on the national level recognized the prison chapters of the NAACP that were run by Europeans. So they was catching hell, you know, which is good. So therefore, that's why I included as part of the, biography that we should get,
Right.
in trying to seek justice.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one last question, Attorney Dew. Want to kind of bring it back full circle to think about freedom in the family again.
Mm-hmm.
And how would you, like if I was teaching a class in history and I was using the book, like how would you want me or any teacher to introduce the book to younger people to get them interested in it?
You asked a very hard question, Dr. Portier, because the education system in America is a system of politics. Patricia and I were on a book selection committee by Dade County Public Schools. And our recommendations was going to be sent to the Secretary of Education of the state of Florida so that books will be bought in mass. And what we saw, that everything about black history was deleted. It's politics. Who controls the governor's office? Who controls the Secretary of Education? That's when we decided, Patricia and I, we have to be the law. We have to be the law, because their law is corrupt. So to answer your question, I hope I did, but what I'm trying to say that we have to tell children at the age of 5, just like I was told when I was 5 years old. Life is not safe. It's dangerous. You have to learn how to live with these silly people. So as a teacher, you can only go so far. You can recognize the militant students in your class to a certain extent, but students have to recognize they can't depend upon even their teachers. They have to learn also outside. Now, I was fortunate the libraries was the thing when I was growing up, so I could go and do reading outside what was being taught. With the social media, I don't know whether that's good or bad, but we need to, our children need to learn that they are responsible for their own learning, even at 5 years old. Minister Thomas, who is my assistant, we got to meet a young lady who's only 4 and 5 years old, and I hope to send you a video of what she's preaching as 5 years old as to what children should do to take care of business. So I'm going to send it to you, Doctor.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Well, Attorney Dew, I've taken up a lot of your time today, but thank you for the lessons about these wonderful books. We're going to do all we can to continue encouraging people to read these books.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm glad I'm still after you.
I know you are.
I know, I'm still working on you.
You know where you can find me.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you're going to be in Atlanta, and I'm going to tell Janita you're coming there and make sure you're straight.
We love to talk with her. Yeah, we will be at the museum.
Okay.
I've never been in that museum. All right.
Okay.